Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind, a channel solely focused on exposing the abundant hypocrisy of the left. Okay, so President Trump obviously took some very decisive action here. Now, of course, the question is, was it justified? And well, it's Donald Trump we're talking about, so any action he takes is instantly going to be met with scrutiny and challenged to the fullest extent. You know, if this had been Barack Obama or Joe Biden's military operation, we would probably be hearing cheers of jubilation, a great American triumph, they would tell us, the most successful military commander in the modern day. But of course, this administration is held to a little bit of a different standard, especially when it comes to scrutiny, and so the media scrutiny begins. And in this case, we've got Margaret Brennan challenging Marco Rubio on the justification for these strikes. And well, let's see what the justification was and if it makes any sense. Let me show you guys exactly what's going on here. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so take a look at this interaction right over here. We've got Marco Rubio and CBS News' Margaret Brennan.
Are you saying there that the United States did not see intelligence that the Supreme Leader had ordered weaponization?
That's irrelevant. I think that question being asked in the media, that's an irrelevant question. They have everything they need to build a weapon.
That is the key point in U.S. intelligence assessment. You know that.
No, it's not.
Yes, it was.
No, it's not.
The political decision had not been made.
I know that better than you know that, and I know that that's not the case.
But I'm asking you whether the order was given.
And the people who say that, it doesn't matter if the order was given. They have everything they need to build nuclear weapons. Why would you bury things in a mountain, 300 feet under the ground?
Right.
Why would you bury why do they have 60% enriched uranium? You don't need 60% enriched uranium. The only countries in the world that have uranium at 60% are countries that have nuclear weapons. Because they can quickly make it 90. They have all the elements. They have. Why do they have a space program? Is Iran going to go to the moon? No, they're trying to build an ICBM.
No, but
so
that's a question. That's a question of intent. And you know, in the intelligence assessment, that it was that Iran wanted to be a threshold state and use this leverage. I'm talking about the public March assessment, and that's why I was asking you if you know something more from March.
That's an accurate representation of it. That's not how intelligence is read. Here's what the whole world knows. Forget about intelligence. What the IAEA knows. They are enriching uranium well beyond anything you need for a civil nuclear program. Why would you enrich uranium at 60%?
Right.
If you don't intend to one day use it to take it to 90 and build a weapon? Why are you developing ICBMs? Why do you have 8,000 short-range missiles and 2,000 to 3,000 long mid-range missiles that you continue to develop? They have everything they need for a nuclear weapon. They have the delivery mechanisms, they have the enrichment capability, they have the highly enriched uranium that is stored.
Yes.
That's all we need to see.
Right. Well,
especially in the hands of a regime that's already involved in terrorism and proxies and all kinds of things around. They are the source of all instability in the Middle East.
No one's disputing that. I'm not doing that here. I was simply asking if we had intelligence that there was an order to weaponize, because you said weaponization ambitions.
Well, we have intelligence that they have everything they need to build a nuclear weapon, and that's more than enough.
So it seems they're pretty confident they made the right call. And now, while Iranian state media is out here telling us that actually these facilities, these nuclear facilities, were, quote, peaceful.
The Islamic Republic of Iran condemns in the strongest terms the United States' brutal military aggression against Iran's peaceful nuclear facilities. It is an outrageous, grave, and unprecedented violation of the fundamental principles of the Charter of the United Nations and international law.
Well, Marco Rubio seems to be telling a completely different story. They weren't refining uranium to 3.5% from medical isotopes. They were well past the 60% threshold and headed straight towards 90%, which isn't that difficult when you've already reached the 60% mark. And when you hit that 90% mark, that's when you get military-grade uranium. I mean, fundamentally, the logic does seem to make sense that that's not peaceful. That's not for civilian use. That's for military use. And of course, it also begs the question, if these nuclear facilities were developing technologies for civilian use, then why embed this top secret facility nearly 300 feet into the mountain? And I'm not sitting here to just toot the administration's horn and shut down any dissent. I'm willing to engage with the more negative outlooks, but at the same time, you can't just be focused on the hyper-negative, and you also have to engage with potential positive outlooks. Maybe this was the right decision. Maybe what President Trump did here was avoid yet again another North Korea situation, where for decades the North Korean regime insisted that they were not pursuing nuclear weapons, but all the while secretly that's exactly what they were doing. If you listen to the president's detractors, none of this was justified. It was plainly evil, an escalation of violence, Donald Trump doing the bidding of Bibi Netanyahu. No legitimate threat here. And then of course the latest argument, that the president acted unconstitutionally. We even got some Democrats floating impeachment.
This was not constitutional, was not lawful in the absence of a declaration by Congress.
It is so grossly unconstitutional. All of you know that the only entity that can take this country to war is the U.S. Congress. The president does not have the right.
It's unconstitutional for the president to declare war against Iran or engage in war against Iran without congressional approval. But well, I'm not exactly sure that that's the case. Based on my understanding, President Trump's decision to strike Iran was well within his authority as commander-in-chief. Article 2 gives the president incredible powers, especially when it comes to military decision-making, and I'm also sensing a little bit of a double standard here. Obama engaged in Libya, Clinton in Kosovo, without a congressional declaration of war. But now, of course, because it's President Trump, all of a sudden every Democrat is a constitutional scholar. I mean, spare me the politicization. It's a complete double standard when Democrats launch missiles. It's brave and it's moral. It's smart military engagement and peace through strength. When Trump does it, suddenly it's authoritarianism. I don't know, like I said, I'm sensing a double standard. And just speaking of the threshold or the standard of war, again, based on what I'm hearing from this administration, the signal they're sending doesn't seem to be an intent to start a war or engage in regime change.
Are we now at war with Iran?
No, we're not. This is not a war against Iran. This is very simple. 67 days ago, the President of the United States sent the Iranians a letter and it said, you're not going to have nuclear weapons. You're not going to have a militarized nuclear program. Let's negotiate. I want to do this diplomatically. I want to do this peacefully. They tried to play him along the way they've played every American president for the last 35 years. The president told them, if we don't get a deal, which is what he wanted, then I'll have to handle it differently. And that's what he did last night. He handled it differently. But that was an Iranian choice. We didn't make that choice. They did. By playing games with Donald Trump, they made a huge mistake. And President Trump acted last night. And I think the world today is safer and more stable than it was 24 hours ago. And a bunch of these countries putting out statements condemning us privately, they all agree with us that this needed to be done. They got to do what they got to do for, their own public relations purposes. But the only people in the world that are unhappy about what happened in Iran last night is the regime.
I think it was more about sending a message that we're done playing this game with Iran. Sure, there's a lot of talks about Trump giving them 60 days to come to the table, but really Iran has refused to come to the table genuinely and honestly for decades at this point. And so it seems the president said, you know what, screw it. Enough toying around, enough games. I'm going to shut the whole thing down. And that's exactly what he did. And I think the truth is that the president doesn't need permission to launch an operation like that. And truthfully, if the House and the Senate doesn't like it, well then the next step, the recourse, is now potentially passing legislation retroactively, potentially curbing the president's authority when it comes to launching strikes like this. But at the end of the day, do you really think that that's going to happen? I mean, outside of the left-wing Hamas caucus, who actually wants to see Iran get their hands on a nuclear weapon? Maybe Rashida Tlaib, Ilhan Omar, and AOC, but everybody else, including Democrats who are now condemning Donald Trump's actions, I think deep down, secretly, they're happy that this happened. I mean, this was the goal of the Obama administration. They wanted to shut down and control Iran's nuclear proliferation, but they completely failed to do so and instead allowed Iran's nuclear ambitions to continue with no oversight or little to no oversight, and also, just sent them billions of dollars, pallets of cash. And so it seems President Trump came in and said, enough of this BS, I'm putting an end to it today. Or at least that seems to be the logic. Now, whether or not this launches a full-scale war, I guess we'll have to see, but according to the Trump team, we are not at war, and there's no intent of regime change. No, rather it was all about sending a message.
Is the United States now at war with Iran?
No, Kristen, we're not at war with Iran. We're at war with Iran's nuclear program. And let me just say, Kristen, that we're incredibly grateful and proud of the American Air Force pilots who did an incredible job last night. The operation was really extraordinary. These guys flew from Missouri. They didn't land a single time. They dropped 30,000-pound bombs on a target the size of a washing machine and then got back home safely without ever landing in the Middle East or ever stopping other than to briefly refuel. And of course, they did that in the air. So it's really an incredible operation, a testament to the power of American military. And I think what shows what can happen when you have that great American military in the hands of capable presidential leadership. What we did is we destroyed the Iranian nuclear program. I think we set that program back substantially, and we did it without endangering the lives of the American pilots. We should be proud of what these guys accomplished. A very, very high impact mission under a lot of pressure.
And well, I guess we'll have to see if it plays out that way. I guess it's a big we'll see situation. I have to admit in situations like this, usually there's unintended consequences. Usually things don't automatically go according to plan, but really we're kind of in uncharted territories here. And maybe it does. Maybe this makes the world a safer place. Anyways, that's pretty much what I got for you guys on this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.